amazing number of people that are here. I'm just hearing recording in progress in my ear, but I think that's normal. I will continue and not leave the meeting, otherwise it would be a bit pointless, I think. So anyway, very happy to see you all. Some people that I've already met, most of you actually I've never met in person, but we have already like bumped onto one another in different meetups, which I think is one of the great things of this online world. And we're going to talk about the power of stories. And before we go into that, I'd love to know, and maybe since there's a lot of people, maybe you can just put your answer in the chat. When I tell you about stories, what's the first thing that pops into your mind? Stories. Sorry, yes?
BDD, behavior driven development.
Okay, yeah, BDD, thank you. Yeah, I see also in the chat biases, value, Alice in Wonderland, a journey, fairy tales, narratives. Yeah, so loads of interesting stuff. Client needs, experience, shared histories. So there's indeed loads of interesting ways, and we use stories everywhere in our lives. I see flags for conversation, communication, a beginning, middle, and end, but not necessarily in that order. Yeah, and that makes for great surprises in stories. So as you can see from everything that's in the chat, stories are part of our life. We can even have them on our preferred social networks where we can share a short video clip and it becomes a story. We're all storytellers, story filmers, story writers. And the world I want to bring you in today is the world of folk tales and fairy tales, because I find that there's great value in these stories and that they can bring people together around a common topic. What I hope is that with this session, maybe you'll be inspired to try it out with your own teams, with people around you, and really just live this experiment. One word of warning, this will be an interactive session. So at some point you will be sent into breakout rooms and you will be expected to participate in any way you want. Okay, so this is the word of warning. However, I will start with a story. It always starts with a story. Today I'm gonna read you a story from Hans Christian Andersen. You know, he's got a fantastic book of fairy tales, classic fairy tales, apparently. So the story I'm going to read you is about the pen and the inkstand. What I would like you to do is, in order to fully enjoy this story, that you sit comfortably in your chair, or if you're standing, that you make sure that your seat, that you're standing comfortably. If you want, you can close your eyes, you can just relax and listen to the story as it is being told to you. The pen and the inkstand. In the room of a poet, where his inkstand stood upon the table, the following words were spoken. It is wonderful how much can be got out of an inkstand. I wonder what the next thing will be. It is indeed wonderful. It is indeed. It's inconceivable. That's what I always say, said the inkstand, addressing the pen and the other things on the table that were close enough to hear. It's wonderful how much can be got out of me. Indeed, it's quite incredible. I really don't know myself what the next thing will be when the man once begins to dip into me. A drop from me is sufficient to cover half a page of paper, and what a deal can be got into that space. I am something perfectly marvelous. From me issue all the poet's works, all those characters so lifelike that people fancy they have met them. Those inner feelings, that humor, and those delightful descriptions of nature. I myself don't understand it, for I'm unacquainted with nature, but it just happens to be in me. From me have issued and still issue those troops of graceful, charming damsels, of bold knights on prancing steeds. of blind and lame, and goodness knows what else. I assure you, I don't think of any of it. You're right here, said the pen. You don't think at all, for if you did, you would understand that you only furnish the fluid. You give the fluid so that I may write with it, and put upon paper the thoughts that dwell in me. It is the pen that writes. No one has any doubt about that, and I should think that most people know as much about poetry as an old inkstand. You have but little experience, answered the inkstand. You have been scarcely a week in use, and are already half worn out. Do you imagine you are the poet? You are only a servant, and before you came I had a good many of the same kind, both of the goose family and of English make. I know a quill as well as a steel pen. I have had a great many in my service, and shall have many more when the man comes who makes the movements for me, and writes down what he gets out of me. I should like to know what he will take out of me first. Ink pot, said the pen. Late in the evening, the poet came home. He had been to a concert where he had heard an eminent violinist with whose glorious playing he was quite filled and enchanted. The artist drew a marvelous wealth of tone from his instrument. First, it sounded like the trickling of drops of water, and like a shower of pearls, then like a chorus of twittering birds, and then again it roared like the wind through the pine forests. The poet almost fancied he could hear the moaning of his own heart, but in melodious tones, like the sound of a woman's voice. It seemed as if not only the strings of the violin gave forth sound, but even the bridge and the screws and the sounding board too. It was a marvelous performance. And though it was a difficult one, it really seemed to play, just as if the bow were merely passing to and fro over the strings, and as though anyone could have done it. It seemed as if both did all between them. The master who led them and breathed life and soul into them was forgotten, but the poet remembered him, named him, and wrote down his thoughts about it all. How foolish it would be of the violin and the bow to boast of their performance. And yet mankind so often does. The poet, the artist, the scientist, the general, they all do so. We are only instruments upon which the Lord our Master plays. To him be all the glory. We have nothing of which we may be proud. I would like to stop for a bit. The story is not over yet. I would like you maybe to, if you've got a pen and paper close at hand, or a quill and an ink pot, that you write down a few of the thoughts of how the story could go on after this. I'll give you a minute, and then you will be sent into breakout rooms. So, Gemma, if you could please prepare breakout rooms of roughly 4-ish people. So how would the story continue after that? We've got the pen, we've got the inkstand, and the poet who's just come back from a concert, who wrote down his thoughts about it all. Okay, so before the breakout rooms start, thank you. Before the breakout rooms start, I will give you the assignment. So when you're in the breakout room, please share with your fellow adventurers, or with your fellow story listeners, how you think that the story is going to go forward. You will have 7 minutes in the breakout room. So please be mindful that if you speak for 6 minutes, the others at some point might be mad at you. So you don't want that. So make sure that you all manage your time perfectly. Okay, so please share in a group how you would like the story to continue. and we will be back in 7 minutes. So click on join to join the breakout rooms. So maybe we can pause the recording.
We got a timeout, and we're told to come back to the main room, so that was good. Zoom is better than Google Meet on stuff like this.
Yeah.
Google Meet is still trying to play catch up on breakout rooms.
Yeah, the timer setup was set to 40 minutes, and that was a bit much. Otherwise, I mean, the rest of the story. So
yeah, but at least you can do things like send a message to all the rooms.
Yes.
So we got all that. Yes.
Yeah,
That's a
that's
lot
great.
more useful.
And thank you for sorry. And thank you for coming back immediately. I think the others are still taking advantage of the extra seconds, which may or may not be a good thing. Hello, welcome back.
Okay. No, nothing's very.
Okay.
As I heard, recording is in progress.
Yeah. Welcome back, everyone. Just a question. You are free to unmute yourself or to write in the chat. How was it to share possible endings with others? How did it go?
I would say it wasn't that hard, but I'm really an imaginative person, so I didn't have too many inputs to add, but my colleagues that were in the room got some quite decent, I wouldn't say endings, but the continuation of the story.
Thank you, Jonas.
Unfortunately, we were in a group of 2, and both of us didn't really grasp the story, so we weren't sure where we were going to go with it. So unfortunately, much by way of I would have thought the groups would have been a little bigger.
Yeah, well, the groups were set up to be 5 and 4 roughly, and I think usually what happens sometimes is as soon as the breakout room starts, some people just leave because they're afraid of meeting people, I guess. So that's just my assumption, and it's recorded for posterity.
Okay, well, there was only 2 of us. So
and so it was our problem. I'd just had to answer the door, so I missed half the story, and so both of us had missed half the story. So we kind of struggled with how we could complete a story that we'd only caught bits of.
That's an interesting one, Alex, because isn't that what life is all about? You meet people halfway their story, and then you try to.
Yeah.
I think for us it was difficult because we felt like the point was made, the moral of the story was already stated. So where to go from there was a little difficult to be imagine about.
Can you maybe share what you came up with, or what your group came up with, Jamie?
The moral of the story to us is that it. The pen and the inkstand, the violin, the bow are just tools, and without the creator, without the mind, or the vision, they cannot produce something of value.
And so, how would the story end then?
That's the part we couldn't come up with.
Okay. Anyone cares to share one of their best endings?
Our group got to actually bond a little bit over the stories as we delved into, what we heard in our youth, essentially, from stories. And one of the endings that we discussed was a plot twist of, for example, the poet being an old man dying, and then the inkstand and the pen have no more stories to tell.
Oh, wow.
They lose their functionality, essentially.
Oh, yeah. I love that. Thank you.
It's dark.
Yeah, it's dark, but I really love it. Yeah, because then the whole discussion that they had before becomes pointless. Yeah. Antonio.
Yeah, one thing I shared is that I like the idea of, well, as you know, we're friends, but I'm into really the idea of systems thinking and thinking we're interdependent. So each of them tried to discuss whether they were more important than the other, and the truth is they need each other. So I thought of a very chaotic ending when the ink pot maybe fell off and the whole ink disappeared, and then the quill or the pen noticed that he also needed him or needed it, and the idea of they also need the poet, the one who puts the ideas, but they're interdependent. It's not that one is more important than the other.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, it makes sense. What happens if there's no ink left? Yeah, it's everyone is part of that same creative process. Yeah, thank you.
That's very similar to what we got. So we were beautifully unanimous in our in our three, and we all came up with this idea that it's an effort of co-creation, and that they realize that it's co-creation. If any one of those three elements is missing, nothing can happen. Without the pen, the poet just has ink and a mess on paper. Without the poet to write the thoughts, there's nothing, and without the ink to actually write the thoughts of the poet down, you can't have anything to see anyway. And then we went down a really meta rabbit hole of what happens then when the ink is on the paper, and how that then influences what the poet chooses to write next. And once the writing takes form, the story evolves as you see it written, and then with the way that this ties back nicely to Agile, of course.
Wow, yeah, what a lovely story, and I love the rabbit hole thinking of this whole being emergent. Yeah, thank you, Kerry. John.
Yeah, I found it really hard to come up with endings to the story outside of the context of this meetup. I think I had some preconceived notions going in of, is this allegory that you're telling us, is there going to be a meaning, and is it going to be related to kind of Agile stories, or should we be just going crazy with this? And I found every thought I had was focusing on those preconceived ideas of what you might want to lead to later on. And I think that was the detriment of it ruined a bit of my creativity.
Yeah, and thank you for sharing this. And it's true that I mean, as humans, our preconceptions are everywhere. I mean, it's not like we can shake them off. It's like when I see a piece of paper, then I mean, my preconception would be that, okay, I can draw on it. Like I can take this piece of paper and then start drawing on it. But what if I started drawing on it while folding the paper and creating some animation? This is also possible, but maybe by default I won't think of it. And this is really also one thing that I find very powerful with tales and stories, is that they invite us to take a sideways look at our lives and at things that happen, and then we can learn from that and how to bring it back into the world. One of the English authors that I like a lot that does a lot of that sideways look, I mean, one of them is dead, Terry Pratchett. The other one is Neil Gaiman. They're both very good as promoting a sideways look at the world. Anyway, I love also some of the examples from the chat where the poet decides to break the pen because he was intoxicated and failed to make a good impression on the person that they fancied, and so that all tools are useless in the end. Now, I also see the time moving forward, and so I wonder, would you like to know what's next? According to Anderson, I'm not sure he was better than any of you, by the way. He's just one other ending to the story. Okay, so as a reminder, after the yes, Good Omens is fantastic. Yeah, they both Terry Pratchett and Neil Gaiman wrote it together. It's a masterpiece. It's
like for me, because I love them, it's like a dream come true, basically.
Yeah.
Sorry,
yeah.
that's.
Yeah, it's and the series is quite good as well. So yeah, Good Omens, a nice recommendation. And there's also some looking at stories, because it takes some stories of like the Armageddon and all of these stories that we have in our lives, and again puts a twist of it, good and evil, how they relate to one another. Fantastic. So yes, oh, what's the, sorry, I'm keeping you waiting for the ending. You know, this is called a cliffhanger. Was invited by Scheherazade. But anyway, so yeah, the poet comes back and says that actually, you know, like some of you said, that it's actually the mind that puts it all together and blah, blah, blah. So, yeah, we are all only instruments. Oh, what was that? So, we are all only instruments upon which the Lord our Master plays. To him be all the glory. We have nothing of which we may be proud. Yes, that is what the poet wrote. He wrote it in the form of a parable and called it The Master and the Instruments. That's fun for you, madam, said the pen to the inkstand when they were both alone again. I suppose you heard him read what I wrote down. What I wrote down. Yes, what I gave you to write, retorted the inkstand. That was a knock for you, for your arrogance, that you don't even see that that you don't even see when you're being made fun of. I gave you a knock from my very inside. I ought to know my own sarcasm. Miserable inkpot, wretched writing stick. And each of them felt convinced that he had made a clever retort. And that is a very agreeable feeling. One of which you sleep well, and sleep they did. But the poet did not sleep. Thoughts welled up from within him, like the tones from the violin, rolling along like pearls and roaring like the wind through the forests. He recognized his own heart in these thoughts and caught a ray of light from the eternal Master. To him be all the honor. So, this is what Hans Christian Andersen decided to write as an ending to the story. Not sure it's better than any of yours. I still quite like that, you know, in Disney stories, the pen and the inkpot would say, oh, we're good friends because we're all blah, blah, blah. We all work on this together. But I like it that he leaves it like it is. But anyway, anyone wants to comment or react, have a violent reaction on what Hans Christian just threw to your face?
Not a big fan of unfinished stories.
Okay. What do you mean by that?
Well, the fact that he just left it there and there was no closure almost.
I like it that you say almost.
Yes, almost. Yeah. You can kind of infer, and that's fantastic. But I would prefer an actual closure. You know, a firm. This is done.
Well, that's something also that Hans Christian Andersen, he's done in different stories where he leaves the rest of the ending open to the reader. Actually, he's done it also in, I don't know if some of you are familiar with The Emperor's New Clothes, where basically at the end the Emperor is aware that he's stark naked in front of the crowd, and the story finishes there.
Right.
And it's like that. And we are, I know that right now there's a lot of people who talk about the hero's journey, about stories needing a beginning, a middle, and end, not necessarily in that order, but then we can also think what makes a story, what makes an ending to the story.
But surely as Agilists, we can't really accept the unfinished story because that's what we work with. The story is unfinished, then how do we know what to do? That kind of contrary to what we do.
Yep. Thank you.
Life is that way too. Life does not make a full circle or answers all the questions, but leaves you with new questions. So it's also interesting that it's that way.
Yeah. Johan, you also wanted to say something?
Yeah, ending that's open to interpretation by the end user is I don't know, if I have to put on my agile, my software hat. If you go to a customer, they can tell you what they want, but it's always kind of open ended, isn't it? So I think in an agility mindset, we want user stories that have an ending as engineers, but as a customer, there's always some room for interpretation and creativity, and endings like that in movies and books are awesome because it's what you tend to talk about after seeing it with a bunch of people, not the ones that just end in a kind of expected way.
Yeah, but surely for the developer and the test analyst, particularly, you need something that is actually definitive.
Now,
the end user. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, because I'm curious as to why the focus has become on the agile user stories, where I'm actually talking about a fairy tale or a folk tale.
So if I can link the two,
I'm not asking you to link. I'm just wondering how come that this has become the main topic.
Because this is Agile Bath and Bristol.
Okay. Yeah.
So like a fairy tale, customer stories are open ended, and there should be room for interpretation in an iterative way. You touch base with them to see how they would like the story to end. Although it's open, it's an open ended ending.
I think it depends on the scope of what you're looking at, because most user stories, they should be fairly self-contained, and you should have a piece of work that you've got a beginning, a middle, and you can say, oh yeah, okay, I finished that bit of work. But then that bit of work can lead on to more work and more stories. And I think it's the same with the fairy tale, because it's something that starts you thinking, and you then move on from there.
Yeah, and I like what you say there, Rob, because actually the only one that doesn't sleep in the story is who?
Oh, it's the poet.
It's the poet, because thoughts start swelling into his mind. And then I'm like thinking, hey, we're at the end of the sprint. We're doing the sprint review. Shall we stop? Is it finished? Shall everyone go home? Or do we go on? We don't know that. That's being decided in the sprint review. Now, I'd like to just go back a little beyond the user story focus. What I'd like to look at is how the pen, the inkpot, and maybe the poet interact with or without knowing. And I'd like maybe for you to think as to at what point or in your career have you ever met a pen or an inkpot? A situation where you had definitely like pens and inkpots talking to one another. And whether you can recognize these stories. I see some smiles and some like people frowning faces and some thoughts. So I would love to send you back into your breakout rooms. Not that you're being punished or what, but for 7 minutes, again, like 4 to 5 people, and just share maybe some of the experiences that you had with pens and inkpots, and maybe maybe it was you. Could happen, but maybe just share that experience and maybe what you learned from it as an agilist, as a human being, how it, yeah. Okay, are we ready with the breakout rooms? Did you recreate them? Because there's some new people who joined as well, so. Or, there's some people that are unassigned.
Is there anybody who's not able to get into a room at the moment? I think these are people that are, oh, hang on, let me
Yeah.
recording.
Welcome back, everyone. I still see smiles.
This was too short.
Oh, it was too short, just like life. Sorry.
People said my story is dark.
Yeah, we're not going to ask you who was the pen or who was the ink pot, but maybe if you could share one of the things that was said in breakout rooms. And please, if you do so, I would like you to not say, oh, by the way, Chloe told me that story where she said that Andy was the ink pot or the pen. So please, if you share something, just share an idea that was said. We don't want any mentions, and don't. Okay. Anything that came up that you want to share? Yeah, Thomas?
Yeah, for me, it came up at the end. I had the idea. I realized in the beginning of a startup, I saw this issue a lot of times. There was the one with the idea, or the guys with the ideas, and then the money came in and said, okay, I need a bigger share of the cake. And then the executors said that we also need to have some part of it. And there was always a fight about who is important and who is really the leading part.
Wow. Yeah. Yeah, that's true. And I like the one with the idea and the executors, and suddenly it's like, hey, but how come suddenly there's this discrepancy and that we create this? Yeah.
Yeah. And it failed a lot of times because of this discussion. So
yeah. Thanks for sharing, Thomas. Tanya?
We thought that we all in our group met people who are very individualist, and they could be very passionate at the same time, but they think like everything is, well, they can't see the bigger picture, can they? And like everything is about them. So they can be very like driven, they can be very passionate, but they just like, yeah. One, I think it was Rebecca who compared it to a tornado, who's just like, they just drill through, like, not, yeah.
Wow. Yeah, thanks. And it's true, if you're not aware of your surroundings or of the importance of your surroundings, then yeah, I like this tornado metaphor where you kind of can destroy everything without noticing. Yeah. Yes, yes.
Yeah.
Sorry, was somebody going to speak?
No, I mean, I was inviting you to speak.
Sorry. Yeah, we did kind of have a chat about this whole sort of concept of interdependence, or dependencies between the pen and the ink. You can't write anything with a pen only, and obviously you can't just chuck ink at a page and expect it to fall in the right place so it tells a story. But there was a last comment, I think I was the one that made it at the very end, that perhaps the pen isn't overly dependent on the ink. There could always be another medium that you can use to write, like in blood.
Oh.
But
yeah.
But yeah, there definitely were people or roles, if you like, that had this kind of holier than thou. I'm all important. Without me, none of this gets to happen. And you're thinking that's not exactly true. But yeah, we'd need to kind of disabuse you of that kind of way of thinking.
Yeah. And I like the observation that's been made in the chat. With an ink pot, anything can become a pen, even a rudimentary one. I could even use my finger to start tracing stuff. Yeah.
See, that's the comeback to that.
Yeah. Thanks for sharing, Chloe. Yeah.
I think what strikes me the most is living the discrepancies. Having experienced myself working with someone who was either the pen or the ink, whatever. I was saying that we could be both at the same times, but we have this strength, and it's one thing to accept each of us strength, but it's another thing to practice it and to respect it and to adapt, to adjust, because sometimes it's very hard. It starts by probably knowing ourselves, and this is a long road as well. And then it goes with how do I adjust myself to others? And sometimes we resist, sometimes we don't want. So discrepancies between the theory and the practice.
Yeah, and that's a tough path to walk, because it's a thin line really between this and becoming a holier than thou preacher, than like you should do this, and yeah, it's a very thin line indeed. Only blood, no. It's about blood in the chat. I don't think people, it's becoming crazy there. It's funny, but I'm not going to read it. You if you're seeing this on YouTube, you should have been there. So I'm wondering now, because of this and because of these last comments, because also we've all met them somewhere, and also what I find intriguing in the story is that even after the poet writes the poem about the violin and the bow all playing together in a part that is bigger than them, that they still don't realize that. So one next assignment for a new random breakout room would be this. And I will give you first 1 minute to think about it, to write something down. And if tomorrow you meet either a pen or an ink pot, or you meet a situation like that, maybe I'll put it another way. If you were the poet, what would you have said or written to the pen and the ink pot to make them maybe not completely change, but look at their own roles sideways, or to increase their field of view? What would you write? What would you tell the pen or the ink pot in order to help them increase their field of view? If that makes any sense. If it's confusing, please let me know, because I'm Belgian, so English is not my mother tongue. So I might not have the right words. Okay, so Gemma, if you could maybe recreate some rooms, and roughly 4 to 5 people in the room. So the idea is now, what would we tell them? Yep.
Okay, done.
Yeah, you can go.
So 7 minutes, and join those rooms.
Yeah, it's too short, these 7 minutes, but hey.
That's what you wanted, shall we?
Yes.
The pressure.
Welcome back. So I'm not going to ask you to debrief this or to share what you would say, because I think that the conversations you had in your room were yours. But what I would like to ask still is, what did you learn in that last bit? So it's not necessarily what you will tell them, but what did you learn about, like, being with people, working with people, being around human beings in that last bit?
Well, one of the things that came up in our group, that you can start from diametrically opposed positions, but there is always an overlap. So there is always some common ground. And I guess you can use that as a means of building on. Wow.
Beautiful. That's a wonderful quote. I would love to have been in your room. Yes. Yeah, thanks. Someone else wants to share something?
To jump in right after yes, I would say, as long as you make sure that the space is ready to find, the space is secure enough to be able to find that middle point. And that make me link to what we just were ending on in the group, was saying, you have to make sure that the minds are ready to live something different or to see, because you have to work it out just before to make sure that we can get there. It's not easy.
Yeah. Thanks, Chloe. Antonio.
Yeah, something lovely that came out of our room was that the idea of what that is besides what we think are our tasks, we need to start seeing the bigger purpose. You know, what's our bigger purpose besides our own physicality? You know, what we supposedly do in a specific time. What is the bigger purpose? And Michael said something also that was really lovely about the what if the ink pot maybe is the servant leader, right? That generates the conditions, the ink that makes this creation beautiful in the canvas of life. So that came up and was really, really great about the idea. What emerges, you know, as a collective, I've seen it in perspective. What do we contribute? How do we, you know, magnify our strengths?
Yeah.
You know.
And I like that, because if we link it back to the principles or to the values of the Agile Manifesto, it's also about like uncovering better ways of doing work while doing it and helping others do it, so the others are also there. It's not just about us. It's also supporting others in doing it, which might not be easy. Yeah. Thank you, Antonio. Yeah, Kerry.
What's occurring to me right now, and you know, take from this whatever metaphor or link you want to, is that nobody's talking about the paper.
Wow. Yeah, it's true.
Like I say, you can infer whatever metaphor you want. But,
I was going to say, was that a mic drop there, Kerry?
Yeah. I think we can leave that open for interpretation.
Yeah, that's one of those open-ended stories right there.
Yeah.
Though in reality, you don't need the pen, paper, or ink to write. A poet writes in his head first. I write every day, and I'm writing articles all the time. Then I sit down and transcribe. So transcription is not writing. Writing happens elsewhere. You don't need a pen and paper or ink for that.
Yeah, but if somebody else can't come back and read it, have you really written it? Regardless of whether it's in your head or not.
Yeah.
Of course, which is a different problem statement altogether, the transference.
Yeah. This is really getting into the deep territory of if a tree falls into the forest, does it make a sound, and all this, and I really love how from what could be like a simple story or a simple folktale, you can derive so many things, and this brings also to the next bit is now that you've experienced this session, you know, listening to a story and maybe finding another ending or even reflecting upon it with others, the first question that I would like to ask you about, and I will give you 1 minute. So during this minute, you can pre-write your answer in the chat, but please do not press enter. Okay, I will give you 1 minute with this, and then at the end of the minute, I will blow my whistle. And at that moment only, you will press enter so that we will see all the answers coming in at the same time. Okay, I can already see some excitement building up. Now, what's the question? Well, the question is, in a maximum of 3 to 4 words, not more, what is this story about? So you've got 1 minute. You can type your answer, but please wait until I blow this whistle to press enter. What is this story about? With a maximum of 4 words. I'm just going to write it in the chat. A few more seconds, 12, something like that. Okay, I see that everyone is waiting for me to blow the whistle, so too bad for the last 4 seconds. Okay. Now, just take a moment to look at all these answers. And think back when earlier somebody said, oh, the moral of the story is quite clear. Joe, you're on mute. I don't know if you're speaking to us or no. Okay. I thought you were saying something very smart there. So, by the way, know that in Zoom, you can always save the chat. So if you want to keep this for reflection later on, there's 3 dots on top of the chat, you know, where you just typed your message. And then you can click on save chat if you want to keep it to look at it afterwards. So we can see here, knowing your place, giving a sense of perspective, interconnection, listening, respect, team, perception of selves, acceptance, collaborating more effectively as we want it. You know, this story is about what we wanted, yeah. And there's so many different perspectives of this same story. So now I would like to ask you, and here you can unmute yourself, and if you were to use this in your own context, would you consider running a story event, picking a story, a fairy tale, or if not, why not? And if you would, what would it make possible?
I think it's useful to find a parable, because sometimes that can illustrate something in a way that just saying it in a dry way might not.
Yeah, totally. Because what we've met here with the ink pot and the pen, I've seen countless of times in different organizations and teams that I worked with. But telling them, hey, please stop, you're not that important, you know, might be a bit blunt, might not be well received. However, hey, let's listen to a story. And how do we recognize this? Can we see something? What would we do about it? And then everybody becomes co-creator of the solution. Thanks, Russell.
I think it's a non-confrontational, neutral position to start a conversation from. That you know, if you think how we started with this story, you know, it sounded sort of reasonably innocuous to start with, but it's actually generated some really great discussions. So it's a good place to start, to sort of generate that discussion between a group of people and for people to discover themselves, where they fit within that team and the importance that they have as being a part of that whole, rather than you know, just thinking about themselves.
Yeah, exactly. Thanks, Christina. This whole story, hey, let's listen to a story. What harm could that be, right? Could that do, right? And then you start digging deeper and then going into the rabbit holes, and then, yeah.
I would certainly use this exercise, not necessarily this particular story, but the exercise has value.
Yeah, thanks. Yes, there's really countless stories, and I know that usually when you see things or storytelling workshops being advertised, they're all about like, how do I tell a story? What I hope to share with this is that actually you just need to pick a book, pick a story. Well, of course, choose your story, you know, and if you pick The Lord of the Rings, well, you know, you might lose the group at some point. But, you know, pick a reasonably short story. And as someone said earlier on, you know, like where the writer makes the point at some point. totally misquoting this, but it's really about like taking this as a starting point for a conversation. So you can see Hans Christian Andersen, you can see the Brothers Grimm, you can even have children's book. I have also this one, which is a more recent one, which is, and Chloe will recognize it. What do you do with a problem? It's a beautifully illustrated children's book, but that can be used also to talk about like how do we deal with stuff, how we deal with anxiety, with fear in the workplace. I mean, the illustrations are just marvelous. So you can, I mean, really, there's been so many great stories written, you don't have to invent them, which takes away some of the pressure, by the way. You only have to be able to read and speak. Even with a Belgian accent, it works.
Especially. And let the others speak.
And let the others speak, yeah.
Yeah, that's kind of ties out. I think the thing that was occurring to me was kind of, running a storytelling session, I can imagine kind of disappearing down a rabbit hole, trying to select, a story that matches kind of, what the, I guess, the point I want to make or the situation I want to explore. But then maybe the idea is to kind of not get hung up about too much about that. It is about starting a conversation. You can't control the conversation. It's about starting a conversation.
Yeah, exactly. And if I told you, Ewan, no, it's not about that. The story is about something totally different. What will happen? The conversation will just stop.
Yeah.
That's a very good way to stop a conversation. Tell them that they're wrong.
Yeah.
Great. Well, we're nearing the end of this bit and nearing the start of the after party. I really want to thank you all for your participation throughout, and I would love if maybe some of you could share a bit, maybe if you want to speak something, maybe something that you take away from this session. Not everyone has to do this. If you want to share it, please do. If you don't want to, that's fine as well.
I'm just surprised how, with this beautiful workshop, my brain managed to produce something, because I thought like after a working day, I just wouldn't be able to think of anything. So thank you.
Wow.
I surprised myself.
Thanks for sharing, Tanya.
I actually wanted to thank you because this is the second time I get to listen to you. The first time was in Agile Day not too long ago. And both times you actually very much emphasize the point that you are trying to make with bringing a story of something else completely and still being able to make a wonderful point that translates into, a professional lifestyle, into a professional work setting.
Thanks very much, Masvidis. And I'm still, looking forward to going to Vilnius or Kaunas and that we meet someday there.
Hopefully.
Yeah. Thank you. I can see also in the chat, the takeaways, perhaps priding myself on being direct and a plain speaker might not be the most productive way to be. That's wonderful. Thank you for sharing. I'm not going to name you since it's in the chat, and so that the people on YouTube won't know who that is.
I think for me, the big takeaway has been how such a simple, or on the surface of it, such a simple story can produce some pretty profound insights. From so little comes so much.
Yeah.
And building on those insights as well, like to see how many people could interpret things differently and have different perspectives on one shared thing teaches us to have so much, to always have that understanding and love. You can, if this is how we interpret stories, you can think about the complexities of the workplace and how many people may be taking away how many different versions of interpretations and perspective in there, and the importance of that sort of consideration that's required around it.
Yeah. This is key, and I've been running a lot of these workshops in 2020 online, and we've had people from all over the world. I mean, here we have people from South America, we have people from different parts of Europe, we have people from North America as well. So, and it's all about the interpretations that we have around the same stories. Back then, when we did that workshop, we had also people from Asia, from India, from, I mean, different parts of the world, and it was really everyone's culture was also brought into that story, into that breakout room. And then, you know, there's lots of things happening around diversity and inclusion, but I think these storytelling workshops are about that without labeling it that way. This is one thing that I really learned about that. It's about, hey, we're all people, we all have different interpretation. Whether our skin color is the same or not, actually it doesn't matter because we think differently. Anyway. Yeah. Oh, and I see that there was a facilitation session using a quote from Marcus Aurelius. Wow. Yeah. And this is really also something. Loads of people try to create or to craft very complex workshops. And at some points, it's about what's the most important bit that we want to get out of it, and how is this contributing to reaching that goal? So maybe the challenge that I want to leave you with is to challenge yourself. How can I make it simpler? Yeah, Thomas.
I've got a question. How to, if you hold this workshop only for one particular team or one company or something like this, and eventually there's a problem with some people that are the pen and the inkpot in this company. Would you have brought up this story to them, or how to avoid that they are finger pointing and said, yeah, that's all those three guys there, or what does he mean? Does he mean we all are having this problem or something like this?
So I think that the first thing that I would do is I would rephrase what you just said. So I would not say there's a problem with certain people.
No, of course not saying it, but
no. But I mean, I would. But usually, I mean, people say, "Hey, Cheryl, we've got a problem with A, B, and C. Could you help us fix this?" I say, "Okay, what's the problem in your relationship with them? Because it's not the people that are the problem; it's our relationship between one another." And so then I find a story that kind of fit that relationship. I don't know if that makes sense. Yeah. So it's about finding a fitting story to that narrative that's between these people in that company. When people ask me to come and help them as a coach or a Scrum Master for their organization, they ask me, who do you want to see interviewed? Or usually they prepare a list of their best people, you know, the ones that work the best. What I tell them, I say, oh, yeah, thanks. I would like not to see them. What I'd like is I would like to see the rebels. I would like to see the people that are, you know, the bad, I'm going to say bad boys. It's not gender neutral, but the bad people. I want to see the outsiders, because they have loads of things to say. The good people, they're just going to say, oh, yes, you know. But it's really about meeting the other people, listening to them, because usually they're not being listened to. And then seeing what can we then do from that. With that being said, I really want to thank you all. It's been lovely, a lovely session. I really loved everything. I'm going to save the chat, by the way, because there's so many deep things coming from that. And hereby I hand over to Kerry, Gemma, Ewan, I don't know, everyone.
Thank you very much, Charlie. That was an amazing session. Really, I think very different, very bloody at times. But that was fine. It's how we roll here. Yeah. So for those of you who want to join Kerry for the after party, Kerry is going to be hosting the after party. So do feel free to go grab yourself a drink, whether that be an alcoholic drink or non-alcoholic drink, and then I will be stopping the recording so that whatever happens in the after party stays in the after party. So with that said, let's stop that now. There we go. Stop